After all these years, this is a first-time presentation of a furniture piano. Stick around. Hi, this is Ted Barsley with Alamo Piano Galleries. If you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and also tell all your friends, ask them to subscribe to the channel. And if you haven't, take a look at our inventory in alamopianogalleries.com. And as you're going through there, kind of keep in the back of your mind what I'm talking about today, furniture pianos. And also, if you have any questions or comments on maybe your first furniture piano or first experience with piano, I'm willing to bet a lot of people's first experience with a piano is what I call a furniture piano. We refer to them as furniture pianos every now and then here in the store. And what does that really mean? Well, I'm going to tell you what it means. Originally, when pianos got real popular, like after World War II, they regained a popularity that pianos never had before, and everyone wanted one in their house. So like all the manufacturers, and there were a lot of them at one time, came out with their own design and unique look for furniture pianos that would blend into your furniture of your house, either colonial or modern. And then they also had a lot of those beige and blonde pianos that came out during the like post Art Deco years. And so there's a lot of different kind of pianos that have curvy legs in the front or fancy legs, a little bit of features on the front, a carved music rack. And Baldwin was a major manufacturer of furniture pianos as well as institutional pianos. And I got to thinking about what's a good idea for a video today, and I thought, with all the furniture pianos that we have in our stores, and they're always in the back end of the room because, well, they're older pianos. And I got to thinking that most people's first experience on a piano is going to be at a relative's house if they didn't have one in their own home, or a friend's house. Someone had a mom that taught piano lessons in the neighborhood, or a grandma that taught, or an aunt and uncle you'd visit, and there'd be a piano there. And that was always a fun thing. Now, I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, and wherever there was a piano, well, we'd always get around it because there wasn't much else to do. And the point I'm trying to make is that most people's first exposure to piano and to music and to see someone play or sing a song is going to be on a piano that's either like this or smaller, a spinet. Spinets were extremely popular. They were not quite half the size of a normal upright, but they could kind of get two soundboards out of what was a big old, say a 53-inch saloon piano. You could cut that soundboard in half and make two spinets out of it. So manufacturers had a lot of different pros and cons. The main thing they wanted was to have a lot of inventory for people to pick and a lot of different furniture styles for them to pick on. And so the other thing I wanted to mention is that it was always there to practice on. And the only complaint I ever had about furniture pianos and even furniture spinet pianos, and I include spinets when I say that, and whether they were Baldwin, Wurlitzer, or they had all these different tons of manufacturers, different names. There were literally over 11, almost 12,000 piano manufacturers listed in the Piano Atlas at one time. We now have two major American manufacturers that build pianos in this country. It's Steinway & Sons and Mason & Hamlin. And both of those, for the most part, are essentially kind of like handmade pianos. There isn't any major production. When's the last time you saw a Steinway furniture piano? That's something to think about. A lot of their pianos are always kind of institutional looking. And that's a lot of the instruments that we've featured here on this channel. I got to think of what could I do that would be different. It's like, let's talk about the home piano. And home pianos have been around since like the 20s and 30s. And they kind of dropped off there during the Depression and during World War II. So there was a kind of about a 15-year vacuum of a lot of consumer products. And after World War II, things couldn't get busy enough for anyone. And that's when the piano started to boom. And certainly in the late 50s, in the early 60s, with the invention of the I Love Lucy show, well, that had a piano in the back that I don't believe they ever paid for. It was lent to them. It was part of the set. And the guy never asked them to pay for the piano because he sold so many pianos off of that one on the TV. and I believe it was the dealer out in Southern California in Los Angeles. So there's a story that almost everyone has. My grandmother used to have a Baldwin. My aunt used to have a Wurlitzer, and Wurlitzer used to make these really nice little grants. What was really kind of unique about the Wurlitzers is a lot of those pianos had what's known as, laminated soundboards. So they would take a thin layer of spruce and another thin layer of spruce, and in the middle you would have filler material that made it essentially plywood. We don't use plywood in terms of talking about pianos. We don't talk about plywood. They're called stacked lumber, or they're called laminated wood. The thing about laminated soundboards is, unless someone tells you, it's really kind of hard to tell, with the exception of a spinet piano. On a grand piano, it's kind of hard to tell on a laminated soundboard. I don't have any complaint with laminated soundboards, especially if it gives you a grand piano that's within your affordable range. And that was a pretty big thing back in the day, is that everyone almost kind of had access through someone or somewhere for a furniture piano. And what you get with a furniture piano is something that sounds like, quote unquote, a typical upright. And how can you tell that strings are shorter and the soundboard is smaller? The same way you can tell if you go to a digital piano and you go to those upright settings. And I know they sample those, Kawai and all the other manufacturers, they sample those pianos with the exception of Roland, because theirs is different. They use modeling. But my point is that they're always kind of slightly out of tune. And it's the one thing about furniture pianos is they're usually at the back of the store, because most of them come in if they're traded in, or if they're just sold or we purchase outright, or if they're in a lot of pianos that we get from a guy that collects them out in the country and brings them in. Whatever the deal is, they're generally untuned, or they haven't been tuned. This particular piano is just about 25 years old. And I'm going to contend, I'm making this up, but it's my professional opinion that this thing was tuned the day it was delivered, and I'm the first guy to tune it since it was delivered. And I don't mean delivered to the store, I mean delivered to the original owner's house, because I had to do a pitch raise to where this key was really coming out sounding in between these two. So it was almost a whole step down. I had to pitch raise the whole thing up. Whenever you hear a tuner or someone talk about pitch raising, what they're talking about is that every single note has to be raised. If it's more than a half step, or more than 50 cents or whatever it is, if it's close to a half step, they charge for a pitch raise. And I never do, because I don't really go out and tune a whole lot. I tune in a store. And so a pitch raise is to get it to where it's supposed to be. However, if you remember in one video, I actually lowered the pitch down to 432. So it does take a little bit of extra work. The problem with a pitch raise, particularly on a furniture piano, is that they're more designed and manufactured for mass consumption. So the pin block material is still excellent. Baldwin had excellent pin blocks. Most manufacturers after the mid-50s had really good pin blocks. Leading up to that point, some of them, especially on the furniture pianos, were a little shaky, depending upon how long they've been building pianos. And the point I'm trying to make is that upright pianos are a tad bit harder to tune than a grand piano, and spinet's even harder than that. So when the smaller furniture pianos come in, they're generally way out of tune and haven't been tuned in at least a decade or so. Does that harm the piano? Yes and no. Pianos live a life that have a medical file that is a little bit different than a human, but it's hard to find out sometimes what the medical history is of a piano. And there's ways, that's a whole separate video, but my point is, not having it tuned is neither good nor bad. It's not perfect for the piano. And pianos are an instrument that are designed by design. They suffer what their basic design engineered step avoids, which is neglect. A piano will not entirely pull itself apart and fall apart if it's 100% neglected. It's just not going to sound good, and it's not going to feel like it functions well when it's out of tune. Nothing gels, nothing goes together. There's no sympathetic or any kind of vibrations that are going with anything else, and you can generate all different kind of vibrations on an out-of-tune piano. It's an entirely different kind of presentation of music and what it could be, what it isn't, and maybe you're glad it isn't, but some people like an out-of-tune piano. It's very nostalgic. It does set a mood. In fact, I'd be willing to contend that you hear probably just as many out-of-tune pianos in music, stage, and screen as you do in-tune perfect pianos. The in-tune perfect ones are probably going to be with the soundtrack, the record or CD that you get. Meanwhile, you hear a lot of untuned things within a movie. If there's a piano in the background, it won't be sounding perfect unless it's in a jazz club or something. Most of the time it's going to be out of tune a little bit. And out-of-tune pianos, they set a mood. They transfer an emotion. They speak all different kind of things than what a perfectly tuned piano does. But the point I'm trying to make is that almost all uprights, if you go to a digital and you just focus on those upright settings, it sounds like they almost put a little bit of a flange or a little bit of a phase or some kind of a chorusing on just one note. And you can always hear a little bit of a twist in them. And when you start mixing them, now this one was tuned perfect, but since I had to raise the pitch so much, I've also tuned it like 5 or 6 times, but it's all been in the same day. Rather than have a piano tuner pay for a pitch raise, if I were employing them, I'd say, look, I'll pay you for a pitch raise. How much are you going to charge me for 2 tunings if I order 2 up front? I want 1 done, and you can charge for a pitch raise on that, but I want you to come back and really tune the piano like 2 or 3 days or a week later. So I'll live with it gradually improved. I know it's going to take some time, and then raise it or lower it or get it in perfect tune so it sounds like a concert grand piano. It takes a lot longer to tune an upright piano than it does a grand piano, and it's a lot more work and a lot harder. That's why in this day and age, there's a lot of tuners that won't touch an upright. You couldn't pay them enough to tune a spinet because there just isn't that much room to work. My only complaint about working with upright pianos is it's hard to get one individual string to ring for each key when you're trying to tune it. Some of the rubber wedges and some of the felt wedges are too big to fit in between the strings because the strings are so close. I think they're as close as they could possibly get because if they were any closer, they'd be vibrating against each other. And there just isn't much room to work in there. And then as you start tuning, the hammers seem to start coming up closer, so there's less and less room for you to go in there and dampen the strings that you don't need to hear. You only need to hear one string ringing against a permanent tone. And so if you have 2 over here, you'll never get that thing in tune. You'll be it's really hard because one is a distraction to the other. And you can't tell which one is in or out of tune with the original solid note. So with that, the point I wanted to get to with furniture pianos is look for them. You will find them for free all over or for $1, or call this guy and pay a lot of money to get it moved and you can have a free piano. These are a lot of times the focal point of piano scams, and everyone's worried about getting scammed. Well, if you deal with a reputable dealer, you'll never get scammed. But if it's the person that's got an emotional scar because someone left them this grand piano and all you got to do is pay me money to have it moved, and it's never in your neighborhood, it's never down the street, it's never your neighbor, it's always out of state, and send the money ahead of time to the mover and he'll go get it, and that guy's in on the scam too. So I don't know a whole lot of these scams, but there's a bunch of them out there, and it's not just in the piano world. The ones in the piano world always get kind of a lot of publicity, probably because I look at piano pages, but at the same time, it always seems like there's a grandma getting taken advantage of. So like those negative stories travel fast. My point, again, on furniture pianos is ask yourself, what was your first exposure to piano and to music? And I'm willing to bet that about half the people, it's a furniture piano in a relative's or a friend's house, summer vacation. Oh, at summer camp, someone donated a piano, so in the cafeteria room there was a piano like this, or it was a different manufacturer's piano. There were so many different types of pianos that all kind of looked and sounded the same. For the longest time, this back section of our recital hall was filled with nothing but furniture pianos. And the smaller spinets that are rough looking and not that nice, I mean, almost like ugly pianos. We've had our share of ugly pianos come through this store. And discount for ugliness, you have to in this day and age when people are used to having nice, new, fancy technological things. And they come in to buy a piano and there's a 60-year-old clump of made out of coffins or something. A little kid doesn't really want that. The parents might, the grandparents might, well, it's just like mine. Let's get them one that's good enough to get them started. Well, if it stays in tune and it plays, yeah. If it's more work than it's worth and it's kind of ugly and doesn't sound very good, don't do anyone a disservice, certainly not yourself or any of your family members. But on the other hand, there are some phenomenal deals on greatly underused pianos like this one. This piano, for the most part, was played probably the first 3 or 4 years of its life, mildly. People playing, you know. Playing simple songs. And that's what they're made for, to get someone started on piano. And I know that a lot of people played on some really small spinets and some really limiting furniture pianos. And they just rehearse and rehearse and rehearse and practice. And when you see them play on a grand piano, it's just really uplifting. Watching a student go from their home environment to the stage on a nice, perfectly tuned piano, you realize furniture pianos serve a major, major function. They inspire people to stick with music. In most instances, it's the first introduction to music in the piano, if not the second, if they saw one at school. In my day, there used to be a piano, an institutional piano that had like big casters, and once a week in elementary school, a teacher would come pushing that piano down the hall, push it into our school, have choir and music class in our class, push it out, go across the hall, and go all the way down the wing of the school on that one day so everyone got their lessons. I know that there's hardly any music instruction in public schools anymore, but a lot has changed in 50 years. Maybe some of these furniture pianos should start showing up in classrooms, and they can just have an open hack, 10, 15 minutes. Whoever knows how to play, go play. Everyone else go watch and copy. A lot of inspiration comes off of furniture pianos. I remember I used to sit down at mine when I was a little kid and dream I was playing a concert grand. Didn't play very well, but it still kept the dream there. And at the same time, I also dreamt that I could get a big upright and have the hammers just playing right there close to almost, I used to like the concept of an upright grand. You still see that every now and then. Furniture piano I grew up with was a Wurlitzer Spinet. If you have one of those or had one of those, or if you have a different kind of furniture piano that you grew up taking lessons with, remember they're also designed to make a child or a young pianist or any player comfortable in the home environment enough to where the piano isn't intimidating. And a lot of polished ebony pianos for a little kid that's going to play on a U1, that's an intimidating monolith. It's like a mountain of a piano for them to sit at for hours on end. So it's less intimidating to have something that's a little bit more friendly and home styled. So with that, I'm hoping that this video garners and collects a lot. And I want a lot of comments about your experience with furniture pianos, how old you were the first time you encountered one, and whether you liked it or not. And with that, remember that I am Ted Barsulu with Alamo Piano Galleries. And go in our inventory and look at how many furniture pianos we have. There's a lot less of them being made and sold in this day and age than there was 50 to 60 years ago. And so with that, bear in mind, furniture pianos are out there. Some are great instruments, some are just old and worn out, but there's good value. And so with that, if we can help anyway, give us a call here and let them know that Ted asked you to call. We'll look for you next time, and thank you for watching our videos here at Alamo Music Center.